Alrighty, on we go with video 3 here, all caught up after this guy. And what we're moving into after nudging and captology is this book right here by Douglas Rushkoff, Team Human. I wonder if anyone's come across Rushkoff or this book in any of their classes. So, Douglas Rushkoff is a media theorist, Canadian media theorist, so bonus points. And he's written a number of books. He's been kind of tracking this whole internet world and this business of digitality and what we call new media pretty much since it's been coming on in a major way. In fact, before that, he was doing interesting work. I used to show a documentary in my classes called The Manufacturing of Cool that he was the narrator for. And it's a little dated at this point, but it's a really interesting look at the way that, corporations are involved in basically penetrating our everyday lives with sensation, sort of like the spectacle stuff we were talking about recently. In any case, so Rushkoff is really sharp. He's been around for a while doing really interesting stuff, and this is his most recent book that I'm familiar with, unless he's come out with another one. He has even started a podcast called Team Human when this book came out, which I was listening to originally there every week and just fascinated by his guests and his conversations. And so we're going to look at 3 chapters. 2 pertain to this week's work on mediation and distortion, and then the last one on mechanomorphism is for week 11 on bodies and minds. But I think I might say just a few words about all that last chapter smashed together with all of them, because they really do go together. And the way to kind of situate Rushkoff, the title of this, Team Human, right? So what he's doing here is he's as someone who's very hip and smart about the power, the reach, the nature of the sort of digital technological world that we inhabit now, he really wants to hang on to an important distinction between that which is human, uniquely human, and that which is digital, right? Because so much of this new realm of digital tech has just kind of swamped over the entirety of our social, public, private lives. And he finds that while there's much to be excited about, and while these devices do incredible things for us, here I am at home in my casita recording a video lecture content that I get to upload, and my students can watch it, and others can come by. And there's a lot of cool aspects of this stuff. Nevertheless, the business model that looms behind this technology and how it's being kind of aimed at us and our brains and our reptilian centers and our habits and our relations to one another, there's a lot to be nervous about here. And so he wants to really kind of preserve what is human, right? By that, and this is a person who, in addition to his work in media theory, is also, at least back in the day, I think, 70s and 80s, he was deeply involved in like guerrilla theater, right? Like he's an art guy. He's someone who spent a lot of time in a theater creating narratives, stories, experiences in a kind of improvisational way and in a very radically experimental kind of way. And I think he sees the theater and improv, experimentation, artistic expression that's raw and fresh and welling up from the human spirit. That is a really special, unique kind of human quality that kind of captures the totality of what it means to be human versus a digital device, right? Because as we'll see here, so much of our lives are being taken over by the digital, and he feels kind of compelled to sort of push back a bit and sort of defend and etch out that kind of special, unique place of humanness. And I found myself reading this and listening to the podcast and just being like, yes, 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 yes. So I personally am like really resonate with this desire to hold on to something that we don't want to just lend over to digital technology, to networks, to automation. That there's something about the kind of the human spirit and the analog, non-digitally mediated human existence and experience, and it's creative and it's artistic and it's social and it's not planned and it's not coded and it's not regimented and it's not part of some kind of database, right? We must preserve this. Otherwise, we'll lose it forever. And then, like mechanomorphism, we just essentially become another machine. All right, so that's kind of, how he's coming at things here. And so the 3 chapters, we got figure and ground, digital media environment, and then mechanomorphism, mostly just kind of making the same argument throughout. So I'll just kind of hit some beats here. But he's someone who's seeing the landscape of digital technology as essentially kind of consuming and taking over our thoughts, our social space, our social interactions. It's taking over teaching. It's taking over how many industries, how many enterprises, how many, the restaurant business, which is something that I spend a fair bit of time looking at. David Chang is a great chef and speaker about food, and he's got a new show on Hulu, and it's called The Next Thing You Eat, and it's all, or at least a couple of the episodes are all about like how technology is just kind of completely upending the restaurant industry. Automation, robotics, delivery, right? And so like where is this stuff not going? What is it not taking over? It's taking over healthcare, automation, right? Like online therapy, bots. It's just swelling and swelling and swelling geometrically by volume and by scale. And so, again, as someone who knows about this stuff and is excited about a lot of it, there's still this kind of holy cow, what's happening kind of thing, right? So figure and ground is this really interesting thing. You've probably seen the image of what looks like what is it, like a duck or a rabbit? It's like if you look at it a certain way, you see the white and it's a rabbit, and if you look at it another way, you see the dark and it's a duck or something like that. And it's this business of foreground and rear ground, right? Or figure and ground, right? So it's about what's in front and what's behind. What's behind sort of supports what's in front, right? But so what's in front is like what's featured, what's being sort of focused on, what's the kind of the protagonist of this portrait, or of this scene, let's say, right? So near, far, primary, secondary, right? Like focal point, supporting kind of context. That's figure, that's ground. Now, his basic point here is like humans should be the figure, right? And technology should be the ground. And that's the way we tend to think about these things, right? Like this thing, I'm the figure, this is the ground, and the stuff that this stuff's connected to is part of the ground. Interesting how it's always in arm's reach, right? Can't be away from this thing because I need it. It's so important. So everything's nearby. So, originally we would think that these are technological supplements, they're extensions of ourselves, but they help us do what we need to do. We are the human agents, we are the human subjects, and all this other stuff is assisting. We are the figure, it's the ground, right? His point is things are switching. Maybe they've already switched. And because of the ubiquity of digital technology, of networks, of the internet and cloud computing and Wi-Fi and surveillance cameras all over the place and surveillance trackers in here and in this thing and anyone wearing a watch, right? So it's become completely like our immersive fishbowl. This is the kind of the fishbowl that we are living in, is this kind of complete and total digital landscape. Ironically or coincidentally, today Facebook finally announced that its new name, it's been talking about the new name for the Facebook Corporation, is going to be Meta. And the reason one of the reasons is because they don't want to just be known for Facebook. The same way that Google at a certain point no longer became Google, it became Alphabet. Alphabet is the kind of parent corporation, and Google is just one of its major products, right? Now, Facebook is going to be Meta, and then Facebook itself will just be one of its products. But this metaverse is where it really wants to go. Now, that is a situation where we will then, I think I've talked about this already, but like we will literally be living within a kind of total digital virtual environment, right? Not metaphorically, but literally. I'm not sure what particular shape it will take, but we could be wearing some kind of glasses that are constantly interacting with sensors all around us that are helping feed it information about where we are, where we're going, directions around the corner. There's a coffee shop over there. Maybe there's a little virtual digital arrow that's pointing me. Maybe I can learn information about the person that I'm walking next to. Maybe there's a shop over there and Yelp pops up and I get all the information, that kind of thing. So Meta is the new direction for Facebook, and all it's doing is just accelerating and enhancing and furthering the kind of stuff that he's talking about here in terms of figure and ground. He talks about number 5 in the prompt here about mimetic warfare. This really interesting question, kind of a philosophical type question about, you think about memes. I've read a number of pieces that suggest that memes have a kind of life of their own outside of, the human brain, right? So someone creates a meme, but it essentially becomes like its own digital organism, and it evolves and moves around the internet with a kind of life on its own. And so, in this sense, the human brain and the eyeballs that are helping it exist by liking it, by sharing it, they just become replicators. We are replicators for a meme's life success, right? And there's a situation where, again, the code, the memes, the imagery, the little bits of sensation, who knows where they came from, but now they're kind of moving across us and through us, and all we are is these bodies that kind of hit buttons and reproduce these essentially kind of self-organizing independent entities, which is a weird thought. But like once a meme is created, it takes a life of its own, right? So he's got these interesting ideas about how it is that digital technology, computing and code and all this are almost getting to a point where they are not, I want to say conscious, but like they have a kind of independent selfness, or they are self-organizing in a way that all we're really doing is just kind of keeping things moving. And so, again, we are now the ground, and the tech is the figure, right? This is who's in control, and I'm just the skin robot that's pushing buttons. So that's the figure ground argument. The digital media environment just kind of extends the analysis here to suggest that this first line, whoever controls media controls society. So think about that last video on nudging. I think I talked about whoever controls the menu controls the choices, right? Now think about the digital media environment as the menu. It's all around us. So if this entire landscape of mediated digitality and what it offers us and what it affords us, if that becomes the ground, then it is in complete control, right? All that we can do is operate within these pre-existing digitally engineered options, right? For where I can eat, where I can go. If I'm going to go somewhere, I have to use Google Maps. If I'm going to eat somewhere, I have to use Yelp. And all of our personal data is woven into these things, and it becomes very, very difficult to extract out of it. I don't know if you've ever tried to get off of Facebook or delete these accounts, but they're so interwoven with so many other things that it becomes essentially impossible, right? And so at a certain point, it's got us, and we are now just kind of like semi-maneuvering through this kind of network of, digital entanglements, right? So here's where, in this chapter, he talks about the kind of the business model behind the technology. So this is an important point, I think, that these things are brilliant. These things speak to the ingenuity of human invention. My goodness, I still remember the onset of personal computing back in the early 80s. I still remember the first Tandy computer that my parents came home with Tandy, I don't think even exists anymore, but at the time, Tandy, Tandy, was like the computer company, and that's the one you had to get. And so they lugged home this massive heavy thing, clickety click, 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 orange screen, big heavy monitor. It could do nothing. That was still floppy disk, like those big square, flat kind of plastic things that were literally floppy that you would put in, and they could save like a half a file or something, But boy, was that exciting. And now to think, whatever, just 30 plus years later, we have so much computing power in just one of these little things. This is like 1 million Tandys, and it's tiny. It's just incredible what we've managed to do. So the technology itself is brilliant. It's cool. It's exciting. It's like, oh my goodness. The big problem is the business model that exists behind these things. I talked about advertising in a previous video. He talks about investors here in number 3 on the second page. And over time, enthusiasm for the intellectual purity of the net was overtaken by the need to appeal to investors. A search engine designed to promote academic thought became the world's biggest advertising agency. So I still remember the early days of the internet. It wasn't this like perfect thing that some people like to romanticize, but there was a kind of moment of wild, wild west. It's like no one knew what it was, where it was going to go. Mostly it was the tech nerds that were there in the first place anyway. The rest of us were just like, huh, what is this thing? What are you talking about? The web? What? Email? What? But for a time, it was like really cool. As it was getting going, it didn't have all of this like ad shit, and it didn't have all this surveillance shit, and it was just a space of like connection, collaboration, exchange, knowledge, information, databases, sharing, right? And then as soon as it started to get some juice in terms of human social engagement and activity, that's when the people with money start to pay attention, and that's where people with ideas about invention start to look in terms of possibilities, and everything converges, right? And so now investors are saying, go there and create things, and we will give you lots of money. And over time, you realize where the money can be made. And it can be made in terms of engagement, in terms of if you get people to spend a lot of time on your product or with your product, then we can show them ads for this and that, and then we can continue, their consuming and push it forward, and everyone wins, right? Meanwhile, what's happening is we're just being kind of compelled to engage, right? All these little psychological tactics that we talked about with nudging and captology. And, you just think about, there's so many examples, but when you finish a show on Netflix or most of the platforms, you finish a show, they give you, 4 seconds, 5 seconds? Sometimes I marvel at how quickly it happens, the turnover. And they're basically saying, like, you're not going anywhere. You might have to pee, you might be thirsty, you might want to take a breather, have a smoke, talk to your partner. Nope, sorry, we're going to leave you from the cliffhanger, and now 4 seconds later, a new episode. These are the kinds of engagement tactics, right? These are the kind of captology, micro persuasion things that we were talking about with Fogg and Sunstein. And they're everywhere, right? Pop-ups, offers, reminders, right? Everything's just grabbing at you all the time. I feel so violated so often just by existing in these networks, and just like so much stuff flying at you, coming at you. Hey, try this. I mean, think about your junk folders. Think about how much crap just gets kind of shuffled off through these bad folders. So it's not so much the technology as the kind of the business incentives that are pushing it in really warped and perverse directions, right? To maximize engagement, get more products. And so what started out as this really cool knowledge, creative kind of space has now just essentially become a big fat, like, open playground where you get to come in, and the cost of your free attendance or free participation is you have to entertain all of this persuasion, this commercial persuasion, this marketing and sales, and everyone's just reaching after you. I mean, think about how it even works with comments. Like, you go to like a super popular person on Instagram, like let's say Joe Rogan, right? Or, one of the influencers. They have millions and millions and millions of followers. By the way, many of those followers are purchased. They're fake. They're just robots or whatever. You can buy followers by the millions. Just got to pay money. And There are farms out there that people just like sign up for accounts and it's all fake, and because engagement matters. So the more engagement, the more endorsements you get, the more sales opportunity. But just think about the comments, right? So what happens is in the comment sections of some of these posts, the Joe Rogan post sometimes will have 10,000 comments, 10,000 different comments. So there, right there itself, just in the comments, there's all of this engagement. There's all of this activity. And so potential, ad people, ad initiatives will go there. People will try to sell their stuff in the comments. You'll be seeing some people talk about some stuff and it's like, hey, everyone, are you interested in this? Come on over here, right? It's like you go where the action is. It reminds me of, when you're getting off 15 and you're going on Tropicana or Flamingo and you're exiting, there's always a person standing there with a sign asking for money. Why are they standing there? That's where the traffic is. That's where the engagement is. That's where the action is. So you increase your chances of getting money by going to the high traffic area. Similar kind of dynamics. All right, so it's really about the kind of monetary incentives that are pushing the choices that the engineers are being compelled to make in terms of getting users onto their service, right, and keeping them there. And that's how your company gets money from the ad folks or from Wall Street, is by that attentional factor, right? So attention, your attention, my attention, being able to get attention, keep attention, hold attention. That's the name of the game here. So, number 6, this business of behavioral psychology. He starts talking about some of this stuff. Variable rewards, social conditioning, fear of missing out, approval, obligation. So, Rushkoff covers a lot of the same stuff that Captology and Nudge are up to in terms of how our mediated environments are attempting to get us, attempting to grab us, attempting to hold us. Maybe this doesn't bother you. Maybe you're totally chill with it because it feels fun and you like it. I don't know. Again, I'm someone who wants to at least be aware of just the kind of the scope of stuff that's trying to get me, that's coming after me. Because it bugs me to know that like I'm being compromised and I might not know I'm being compromised, or I'm being sold to, or I'm being yanked around by some invisible source of influence. I want to know about it, and that's why my research is kind of shifting away from the food stuff toward this stuff here, because it's so troublesome and it's so pervasive. So, let's see here. So that's kind of it for the first two. Mechanomorphism is, again, just kind of extends this argument to suggest that because we are so immersed in this digital media landscape environment, it becomes difficult to distinguish between the human and the tech or the digital, or the inside and the outside. And this business of mechanomorphism is when we, the individuals, the human subjects, are so overtaken and so surrounded by these digital mediated networks, the ubiquity of these devices, the pervasiveness of this influence, these images, the codes, surveillance cameras, the whole of it. At a certain point, it becomes very difficult to know where it ends and you begin, if at all, right? And so think about the ways that machinology, mechanomorphism, mechanisms, right? Humans increasingly become kind of expressions of this larger environment. It's weird, right? Think about an ecology. Think about like an actual kind of biological ecology or a physical social ecology where you have a kind of space, a territory, and you have organisms. They kind of adapt to their environment, right? So if you find yourself with lots of lush berries, then your diet's going to bend in the direction of the lush berries. But if you have very few of those, then your diet's going to sort of stretch out in different ways. You adapt to your environment. His suggestion is that we are becoming machine-like increasingly, right? And not just in terms of the fact that, like, we can insert digital or just tech all over ourselves, right? Like I was just talking to my grad students about this the other night. Like you could literally take every piece of your body away and replace it with some synthetic body part. Your heart, your eyes, your brain, I think so. You could attach to, external stimulators or databases or whatever, and you could still exist, right? And so what is the human? Where is the human? And also in terms of our own kind of thought processes and our language and how we think about ourselves, this business of like biohacking, like hack your body, hack your diet, hack your life, where we take the kind of the language of computer engineering and coding and, that kind of Silicon Valley speak, and we kind of apply it to ourselves, right? We talk about optimizing and so on. That's the kind of thing he's getting at in this last chapter. Number 5, I think, is really wild on the last page. It says, across the world, we see digital sensibilities promoting similarly impulsive nativist behaviors, right? So we start to reflect the platforms. On the platforms, I got to get off Twitter. Every time I'm on Twitter, I get angry. That's probably why I go on Twitter, is because on some weird, perverse way, I like that stimulation. But the behavior on Twitter is nativist. It's impulsive. It's reactionary. Everyone's dunking on each other. There's no comment that isn't snark. There's no comment that isn't about positioning yourself over top of someone, trying to shame someone, trying to out someone, trying to like snarkily comment on something. I hate it so much. So it starts to kind of affect how we think and how we react to things. And yes, of course, this is very much why we had that January 6th insurrection. That was the externalized expression of so much of the bad thought and behavioral influence that we're getting through and because of these digital media environments. So yeah, we should be concerned. That Kyle Rittenhouse shooting is going to trial just right now. That was a dude who decided that during the Black Lives Matter protest, he was going to just go defend his city, and so he shot randomly, I think it was 2 or 3 people who were protesting, right? There's lots of arguments about how it is that Facebook was responsible for radicalizing that guy by showing him all of this, warped information about what's going on, and ping pong. Everyone's dealing with warped information. It's tailored to cater to your biases, your susceptibilities, your vanities, your fears, your rage buttons, and boom, we have all this volatile response, right? So we are increasingly affected in terms of our very subjectivities by all of this stuff. And gosh, I am so nervous about all of it. We hear a lot about Instagram, body image issues, especially with young girls, in that kind of middle school and high school kind of period. Depression, constantly comparing yourself, feeling like crap, trying desperately to like position yourself in relation to others. This stuff didn't exist when I was that age, and I'm so glad it didn't. Now, of course, we still have the same dynamics of who's up, who's down, comparison, but it was so much more like toothless by comparison, and it didn't really just drill into our psyches with the same level of intensity that I think kids these days. My son is of this age, and he struggles. There's a lot of pressure, So not a super chipper analysis by Douglas Rushkoff, but again, he wants to preserve something uniquely generatively human amidst all of this mechanomorphic, figure ground, digital and mediated environment that's being pushed by big money, Wall Street investors, and so on. He wants to hold on to something that is special, that is unique, that is that cannot be captured by digital codes, right? That is unpredictable, that is spontaneous, that is an expression of the very human quality that we all have, should have, want to have, hopefully, right? So there you go. I mean, this is a pretty extreme way of taking the stuff that we've been tracking in the last few videos here in terms of our environments and influence. Here he's basically saying like it's very difficult to separate our brains and our thoughts and our subjectivities from these highly compromising digital mediated networks and technologies. And so he really wants to try to hang on to something uniquely us in the face of all of this. And that's kind of where we're going to move in the last little bit of this class is like, okay, now we've looked at just how bad things are. How might we be able to navigate with some, I don't know, some hope of, preserving our unique thoughts, our unique creative abilities, our uniquely social, cooperative nature. So if you like this kind of stuff, I think he's a great writer. I think there's lots of really sharp, pithy kinds of thoughts in here. Go ahead and pick up a copy. It's a great read. Every chapter is sort of like this one. It's not super technical, super theoretical. It's written in a very accessible way, in a very kind of evocative and provocative kind of way. So love me some Douglas Rushkoff, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about this when we get into data valence next. So caught up on videos, time to grade. Thanks.